Good evening, folks, and this is your ticker guy, Carl, from down in dark Florida. It's the evening again. First off, just a little piece of trivia. I've gotten a couple of emails from people that say, you don't talk to the camera. Well, that's because I don't have a recording studio, folks. I'm sitting in front of my trading monitors, and in order to read from the documents that I am trying to discuss, I must have the camera at a slight offset to where those are on my screen. So you'll have to excuse me if I'm not following correct television etiquette to the T. Secondly, for those of you that made the polite or less than polite comments about my appearance, please note that this is a $100 camera, not a $15,000 studio camera. And as a result, the appearance may not be quite what you would look for. Hey, you know what? Anytime that someone would like me to set up a full recording studio in my home in dedicated space, I'd be more than happy to do so. Just go ahead and send the check, make it out to me, and I'll be happy to do that for you. Okay, let's get to the subject matter. The Federal Reserve. Today, on page A3 of the Wall Street Journal, there was a disturbing article. And I'm going to quote just a couple of things off of here. And let's talk a little bit here about exactly what they're talking about doing. And before I get into the details, I want to give you a little bit of a primer what the Federal Reserve actually is and what it's supposed to be. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 is the enabling legislation that allows the Federal Reserve to exist. The Federal Reserve is about as federal as Federal Express. But it does have a federal charter. In other words, the government has given it its blessing to operate in certain ways. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 makes multiple references to the phrase discount a note. Well, what is discounting a note? Discounting a note, folks, is making a loan. The easiest way for me to explain it to you is that if you were to come to me with a $100,000 note, some asset worth $100,000, and you wanted to pledge it to me, I could allow you to have some money for 6 months or 3 months or a month against that collateral. But I have two ways of doing this. I can either charge you interest, in which case you have to pay me back the $100,000 plus some charge, or I could discount the paper you gave me. In other words, you have a $100,000 piece of collateral. I'm going to give you $97,000 today. You're going to give me the piece of paper evidencing ownership of the collateral. And when that time expires, say 1 year from now, you're going to give me back the $100,000, and I'm going to give you the paper evidencing the ownership of the $100,000 in assets. The fact that I gave you the $97,000 instead of $100,000 would be discounting that note, in this case by 3%. So that is what they're talking about, and when you read through the Federal Reserve Act, you will see that phrase used over and over and over and over again. And that is the essence of all of the authority that the Federal Reserve has. That's what it does. It is the banker's bank. It is the place that banks go for loans. And what the Federal Reserve does is discount notes. Okay? That's the term of art. All right. This is the quote from the article that set me off. Quote, among the options, having the Treasury borrow more money than it needs to fund the government and leave the proceeds on deposit at the Fed, issuing debt under the Fed's name rather than the Treasury's, and asking Congress for immediate authority for the Fed to pay interest on commercial bank reserves held instead of waiting until a previously enacted law permits it in 2011. Okay, let's discard this paying interest on commercial bank reserves for a moment, because that's a separate issue, and I have some issues with that. I have problems with it, but we're going to leave that one out of the discussion because that's not the part that set me off. The part that set me off was issuing debt under the Fed's name. Why? Because right now the Federal Reserve is a creditor. That is, people owe the Fed money. The Fed doesn't owe anybody money. What is being proposed here, and I don't know if this is serious consideration or if this is just a trial balloon that's being floated to see if people will bite on it, is the idea of the Federal Reserve becoming a debtor instead of a creditor. But who would the Federal Reserve be in debt to? The Treasury of the United States? Who's the Treasury of the United States? Us. You and I. So now the Federal Reserve is going to be in debt to you? Well, what if you don't want the Federal Reserve to be in debt to you? I mean, there's a problem here in that the other things that the Treasury issues debt for, to pay your Social Security payments, to build roads, to build bridges, to build bombs. I mean, whether you agree with the fact that the Pentagon is building bombs or not isn't material. The fact is that all of these things go to what is considered the common weal, that is the common benefit of our citizenry. You may disagree with what our government does with the money, but the fact of the matter is that that is the purpose of the federal government issuing debt, is that it needs to pay for its operations, and those operations are supposed to at least benefit the citizenry. But what would be the purpose of the Federal Reserve that would benefit the citizenry? Why would the Federal Reserve go in debt to the United States citizens? And why would we change the fundamental character of what that organization is? I don't like where this is going, folks. We are a debt-based society. We believe that we have the right to a Lexus in our driveway, whether we can afford to pay for it in cash or not. We believe we have the right to a 4,000 square foot house, regardless of whether or not we can manage to make the payments, as we're all finding out. This housing mess and this credit-derived mess is unwinding and will continue to unwind. It needs to unwind all the way back to the beginning. We cannot simply sit here and allow this to continue to fester like this. These authorities are not something that the Federal Reserve is looking to do right now, but the Fed has burned through about half of its balance sheet. When it gets to zero, it is out of firepower, in theory. Now we're talking about the possibility that this could happen, though, and I think we need to decide as a people, are we going to be enslaved by a banker? By an unelected banker? You know, you may be enslaved when you go and get a loan for your house, in that you take out a mortgage and you then buy a house, and now you have a coupon book, and that payment has to be made every month. Same thing when you buy a car. You get a coupon book, and you have to make your payments every month. Okay, fine. But that enslavement is voluntary. This is not. This is involuntary. This is a unelected official, one Ben Bernanke, coming up with the idea that he's just going to enslave you all to him. Well, down this road lies madness, folks. We still have choices in this country. We have the ability to stop this kind of insanity and stupidity, and we have the right to do it, and do it soon. We need to do it soon. These proposals will not go away unless you, the people, stand up and tell Congress, no. This far, no further. Not again. Not across this line shall you step. When does this happen? I don't know. But what I do know is that the Federal Reserve has encumbered about half of its balance sheet so far. The other half is not far behind if this credit crunch does not ease. And there is absolutely no evidence that it's going to. Folks, you need to choose. We sit at a critical time in American history. We've had a very nice run for 230 years. I'd like to have another 230 years. And more importantly, I have a daughter. She'd like to have a good life. If we all become enslaved to the debt merchants, that will not happen. Yes, it is true that there's a great deal of pain coming in our society to adjust this credit excess out. But from that we will emerge a stronger nation, a sound nation, if we do not allow this to proceed. If, on the other hand, we do allow this to proceed, we deserve what we get. And what we get is likely to be extremely unpleasant. I do not know, as I said, whether or not this is a trial balloon or whether there is really honest-to-God discussion about this, but if this does not indicate panic, the idea that the Federal Reserve would run out of money, I don't know what does. So when you wake up in the morning and you try to figure out what you should do from a standpoint of your personal finances or as a standpoint of your corporate finances, keep in mind, Ben Bernanke is apparently having discussions about how he's going to take the creditor Federal Reserve, the guys with the money, and turn themselves into debtors. And who are they going to stick with the bill? You. Something to think about. Have a good evening.